I hate to be this brutally blunt about it, but Republicans truly do live in an echo chamber. They live in a world where their beliefs and their ideas is always protected. And they always have a scapegoat to lay the blame off on. That way they never have to take any responsibility for their actions. They never have to take any accountability for anything. And that's a complete 180 from the Republican Party that I grew up around. I mean, at least they preached accountability and responsibility and pull yourself up by your boots back then. That used to be their platform. But now their platform is nothing but victimhood. Now their platform is nothing but passing the blame off on someone else. And they've already got the built-in scapegoats there. It's the mainstream media's fault. Everyone is spreading fake news about them. If Donald Trump has to face accountability for his actions, well, it's crooked Joe Biden and a Soros-funded government. If you listen to them talk, they just repeat the same talking points over and over and over again in hopes that it will stick. Because at the end of the day, they have no substance, they have no ideas, they have no solutions. And when you live in an echo chamber like that, you can create bogus bullshit stories and pump them out into the world. And when you do, and they get struck down for being the bogus bullshit story that they are, well, you've got your built-in scapegoat. It's the media's fault. The media just wouldn't let us tell this side of the story, so they're always protected. And old James Comer has tried so hard to get Joe Biden impeached, and he's failed miserably. He's humiliated himself over and over again. But whose fault is it? It's the media's, according to James Comer. Take a look.
I would argue the Associated Press is the worst media outlet with respect to this investigation. Right there at the bottom of the barrel with the Washington Post. Yeah. So hopefully, when this is said and done, and the dust settles in the American and the media looks back in disbelief at what's going to happen in these November elections, not just in the presidential election, but in the House races and the Senate races, hopefully they can have a head scratching moment and say, you know what? Maybe the American people have figured out that we're not fair and balanced. Maybe the American people have figured out that the mainstream media has lost all credibility, and they need to regroup. They need to reorganize and have a completely new business model.
Now, I would argue that the mainstream media has covered this story. It's just that they've covered parts of it that James Comer doesn't want you to know about. And they've covered parts of it that James Comer has went out of his way to put his own spin on it and duck and dodge and deny any responsibility whatsoever. Do you guys remember this part of the story?
A new filing just a few hours ago released from federal prosecutors added a pretty shocking, yet somewhat kind of predictable twist to all of this. I don't know if you're ready for this. Russian spies, again. According to the government in this document, Smirnov, quote, claims to have contacts with multiple foreign intelligence agencies and had plans to leave the United States 2 days after he was arrested last week for a months-long multi-country foreign trip. During this trip, the defendant claims to be meeting with foreign intelligence contacts. Prosecutors go on to describe one of these supposed foreign intelligence contacts, a mysterious figure described as Russian Official 1. And wait for this. Quote, it says, Smirnov has reported numerous contacts with Russian Official 1, who has been described by Smirnov in a number of ways, including as the son of a former high-ranking Russian government official, someone who purportedly controls 2 groups of individuals tasked with carrying out assassination efforts in a third-party country. Pause for that for a moment. A Russian representative to another country, and as someone with ties to a particular Russian intelligence service. There is more, prosecutors say, about this. They say this is not an isolated incident. Smirnov is still pushing new conspiracies. This is part of the urgency here, as indicated in this report filed today. And because he is still seeking information from foreign sources. The misinformation he is spreading is not confined to 2020. He is actively peddling new lies that could impact the U.S. elections after meeting the Russian intelligence officials in November.
See, that's the part of the story he didn't want the mainstream media to cover, and that's the part of the story that he's still trying to duck and dodge to this day. He claimed he had the smoking gun. He claimed he had all the evidence. And then when it was a bust, well, they've always got a scapegoat. Watch him try to weasel out of it. It's so pathetic.
Well, look, with respect to the informant, all I knew about the informant was what Christopher Wray told me. He said he was one of the highest paid, most trusted informants in the Bureau, in the entire Bureau, and they had used him for over a decade, and they had successfully used him in prosecuting some criminals. He wasn't a factor in the investigation because we didn't even know who he was. We just knew that there was a 1023 that alleged Joe Biden took a bribe, which was consistent with what we found in Romania and China with how the bribe was allegedly dispersed through the different shell companies and the different bank accounts. So obviously we wanted to investigate it, but we never knew who the informant was. All we knew was what Christopher Wray said. Now we see that the FBI arrested him for lying. It doesn't make sense. It's not the same treatment that we saw when the FBI figured out that the Steele dossier was fictitious.
They are clearly making this shit up as they go along, and it's actually embarrassing to watch. You know, anytime I'm talking with Republicans, they love to talk about their tax dollars and they want to know where their money's going. Anytime you talk about health care, they'll say, well, who's going to pay for it? Anytime you talk about education, who's going to pay for it? If you talk about giving a kid a free lunch at school, they will butt in and say, well, now, wait a minute, who's going to pay for it? But when it's a bogus impeachment against Joe Biden, they'll turn a blind eye and they'll never mention their tax dollars one time because in their world, Joe Biden is their boogeyman. In their world, he's the scapegoat that they lay all the blame on, and they've done absolutely nothing for the American people. But it's always good when someone stands up and says it to their face, like Eric Swalwell did in this clip.
You have been thoroughly, and I want to emphasize, thoroughly humiliated in your impeachment quest, which, by the way, is that happening? Is that dead? I pronounced it dead a couple weeks ago. Is it happening? I don't think it's happening. And so you're humiliated. And so you're digging and digging and digging and digging, and you just want more. But guys, it's not happening. You're not impeaching him. You have nothing. I just invite you to move on. Like, let's do something that actually helps people. Just move on. And we're never going to make you happy because you just don't accept him as president. And so we're wasting everyone's time by doing this exercise.
You know what, folks? They will go out there and they will embarrass themselves over and over and over again. And they will do it for one reason and one reason only. And that is to smear Joe Biden. They refuse to accept him as a legitimate president. They have duped their base into believing that he's an illegitimate president and that he stole the whole thing. And so this is all done to smear Joe Biden, and then they can create this illusion that both sides are just as bad. And people sitting back on the fence will look at it and they'll say, see here, look, they're both crooked. If you try to point out something that Donald Trump is doing or has done, they can always say, yeah, but look at what we've got over here. And when you say, you've got nothing, you've got a bogus impeachment, they've already got the scapegoat built in to say, yeah, well, you guys won't let us tell the story. The fake news media is suppressing our story and they're not telling it. And I always say that if they really had the evidence, if they really had the facts on their side, do you not think the media would lunge at that to run with it and say this is the biggest story ever if it really was true? It's just that it's not, and we can see through it. And as we cruise into the election, we see that they have no ideas and no substance and no solutions. It's just all smearing Joe Biden. His entire presidency, they have worked overtime to smear him so they can reclaim the presidency for Donald Trump, and then they will take credit for everything that Joe Biden has put in place now. If Donald Trump somehow gets reelected, you will see him take credit for everything that Joe Biden has done. Just remember I said it. That's why we can't allow this to happen. That's why we have to keep talking and we have to keep putting the truth out there for people to hear. Because there are, for whatever reason, I'll never understand it, there are people who are still sitting back on the fence. And if you're just a casual viewer of the news and you don't really know what's going on and you're not really dialed in to what's going on in this world, then you turn on the news and you see that the Republicans are trying to impeach Joe Biden and they're telling you that Joe Biden is a crook, and then you flip it over on this channel and they're telling you Donald Trump is a crook, and you go, well, yeah, I guess they're both the same. They're not the same at all. We are headed toward a totalitarian government. We've had a guy say he wants to be dictator just for one day, but he'll give it back to us. For those of us that have been paying attention, we're not trying to spread hyperbole. We're not trying to get people worked up. We're trying to get people woke up to the fact that, hey, democracy's on the line here. And this that they're doing is all bullshit and distractions from the real issues at hand. We cannot take our eye off the ball at this moment. We are right down there. We're on the 1 yard line. We got a couple of seconds to go. We can't look away. We can't take our eye off the ball, because when we do, we could lose democracy forever.